He should have left her to die, but he didn't. In a world where power crushes the weak and silence is survival, Duke Adrian Blackthorne, a man everyone feared but no one trusted, made the worst decision of his life. He saved a woman the world had already thrown away. They called him a fool, a liability, a duke gone soft. But when the men who destroyed her came to finish the job, Adrian didn't negotiate. He didn't bow. He became the storm they should have feared from the start. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. Let's begin. Part 1. The Storm and the Reckoning. The winter came down like a fist. Adrian Blackthorne had seen bad storms before. Blizzards that buried entire villages. Winds that ripped roofs clean off barns. Cold so deep it froze cattle standing in their fields. But this one felt different, meaner. Like the land itself had decided enough was enough and wanted everything dead. He rode alone, as he always did. His horse, a scarred black gelding named Reaver, plowed through snow that came up past its knees. Adrian kept his head low, his heavy fur cloak pulled tight, ice crusting in his beard. He'd been out checking the northern fence line, a waste of time in weather like this, but he didn't trust his men to do it right. Not anymore. Not since the war. The Blackthorne estate stretched across thousands of brutal, unforgiving acres on the edge of the kingdom, where civilization gave up and the wilderness took over. It was hard land, the kind that killed soft men. Adrian had inherited it young, after his father died in a skirmish with raiders, and he'd spent the last 15 years turning it into something that could survive. No frills, no mercy, just discipline, walls, and enough armed men to make sure nobody got any ideas. People in the capital called him cold. They weren't wrong. Reaver snorted, shaking his head hard, and Adrian felt the horse's rhythm change. The gelding's ears pinned back, nostrils flaring. "Easy," Adrian muttered, reins tightening in his gloved hands. But Reaver didn't settle. He tossed his head again, harder this time, hooves dancing sideways in the snow. Adrian had ridden this horse through ambushes, forest fires, and a cavalry charge that still gave him nightmares. Reaver didn't spook easy. Something was wrong. Adrian scanned the white expanse around him. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. Beyond that, just howling wind and snow. He loosened the blade at his hip, a battered longsword he'd carried since he was 16, and guided Reaver forward, slower now, letting the horse lead. 30 paces later, he saw it. At first, he thought it was a deer carcass. Something dark against the snow, half buried. But Reaver stopped dead, nostrils wide, and Adrian's gut twisted. Not a deer. He swung down from the saddle, boots crunching into the snow, and moved closer. It was a woman. She lay crumpled on her side, one arm thrown out, the other tucked beneath her. Her skin was the color of ash. Her hair, dark, matted with ice, spread across the snow like a blood stain. She wore nothing but a torn nightgown, thin cotton that clung to her like a second skin, soaked through and frozen stiff in places. Adrian crouched beside her, jaw tight. She wasn't moving. He pulled off his glove and pressed 2 fingers to her throat, just below the jaw. Her skin was so cold it burned. For a long moment, he felt nothing. Then, faint, irregular, a pulse. "Damn it," he said under his breath. He should have walked away. That was the smart move, the safe move. A half-frozen woman in the middle of nowhere and nothing but rags wasn't an accident. She was trouble. Someone had done this to her, someone powerful enough to get away with it. Getting involved meant questions, complications, enemies he didn't need. Adrian had spent 15 years avoiding exactly this kind of mess, but then he saw her hands. Her knuckles were split, bruised black and purple, defensive wounds. She'd fought, and her wrists, thin, pale, circled with raw welts like she'd been bound. Recently. He looked at her face, younger than he'd thought, maybe mid-20s. Bruises shadowed her cheekbone, her jaw. One eye was swollen shut. Someone had beaten the hell out of her, then stripped her, then left her out here to die. The wind howled. Reaver stamped, restless. Adrian stood, looked back the way he'd come, toward his estate, his walls, his controlled, predictable life, and then looked down at the woman again. "You're going to regret this," he told himself. Then he bent, scooped her up, and swung back into the saddle with her limp body cradled against his chest. The ride back took an hour. Adrian kept the woman tucked inside his cloak, her head against his shoulder, trying to share what little body heat he had. She didn't wake, didn't move. Her breathing was so shallow he had to keep checking to make sure she was still alive. By the time the estate gates came into view, his arms were numb and his mind was racing. The Blackthorn estate wasn't a manor. It was a fortress. High stone walls, iron-reinforced gates, guard towers at every corner. It had been built 2 generations back, when the frontier was even more violent than it was now, and Adrian had kept it that way. His people knew how to fight, how to survive, but they also knew how to keep their mouths shut. He was counting on that now. The gates opened as he approached. 2 guards stepped forward, hands on their weapons, then froze when they saw what he was carrying. "Sir, get Marion," Adrian snapped. "Now!" One of the guards took off running. Adrian dismounted in the courtyard, still holding the woman, and headed straight for the main hall. Servants scattered out of his way, eyes wide. He ignored them, took the stairs 2 at a time, boots tracking snow and mud across the stone floors, and kicked open the door to one of the guest chambers. The room was cold, unused. He laid the woman on the bed as gently as he could, pulled the frozen nightgown away from her skin. It tore in places, stiff with ice, and wrapped her in every blanket he could find. Her lips were blue. Her fingers, her toes. Frostbite, probably. He didn't know how bad yet. Footsteps in the hallway. Fast. Marion Hale appeared in the doorway, out of breath, a leather satchel in one hand. She was 60, gray-haired, and the closest thing the estate had to a physician. She'd stitched Adrian back together more times than he could count. "Move," she said. Adrian stepped back. Marion dropped her satchel on the bed, bent over the woman, pressed her fingers to her throat, lifted her eyelids, checked her breathing. Her mouth thinned into a hard line. "She's hypothermic, severe. Another hour and she'd be dead." Marion looked up at him. "Where did you find her?" "North Ridge, maybe 3 miles out." "Dressed like this?" "Yeah." Marion's expression darkened. She peeled back one of the blankets, examining the bruises, the welts, the raw skin around the woman's wrists. She didn't say anything, but Adrian saw the muscle jump in her jaw. "Can you save her?" he asked. "Maybe." Marion straightened, already rolling up her sleeves. "Get out. I need to work." Adrian didn't move. "Is she going to make it?" Marion shot him a sharp look. "I said get out, Adrian." He left. The next 3 days were a blur of waiting and second-guessing. Adrian didn't sleep much. He stayed close to the guest wing, pacing the hallways, checking in with Marion every few hours. She didn't give him much. The woman was stable, still unconscious, fighting off infection in a dozen places. Her body was trying to survive, but it was a near thing. On the 4th day, she woke up screaming. Adrian was in his study when he heard it, a raw, panicked shriek that cut through the stone walls like a knife. He was on his feet and running before he thought about it, taking the stairs 3 at a time, boots slamming against the floor. He burst into the guest chamber. The woman was sitting upright in bed, tangled in blankets, eyes wild, breathing in short, shallow gasps. Marion stood a few feet back, hands raised, speaking in a low, calm voice. "You're safe. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." The woman didn't seem to hear her. Her gaze darted around the room, walls, door, windows, like she was looking for an escape. Her hands were shaking. Then her eyes landed on Adrian. She went completely still. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Adrian didn't move, didn't speak. He'd seen that look before. On soldiers after their first battle, on villagers after a raid. Pure, bone-deep terror. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, broken. "Adrian Blackthorn," he said quietly. "This is my estate. You're safe here." Her eyes narrowed. "Safe?" The word came out like an accusation. "Yes." She laughed, sharp, bitter, almost a sob. "Nobody's safe." Marion stepped forward slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "You were dying. He brought you here. We've been taking care of you." Well, the woman looked down at herself, at the clean nightgown she was wearing, the The bandages on her hands, the thick blankets, and something in her expression cracked. "How long?" she asked. 4 days, Marion said. 4. The woman pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes squeezing shut. "No, no, no, no." "Easy," Adrian said. "You're not going anywhere. Not like this." Her eyes snapped back to him, and this time there was fury in them. "You don't understand. He'll come looking. He'll—" She broke off, breathing hard, and Adrian saw the exact moment the panic turned into something else. Calculation. Survival instinct. "Who?" Adrian asked. She didn't answer. "Who's coming?" he pressed. Her jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." "It does if they're coming here." She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw something other than fear. Something sharp, defiant. "Then you should have left me in the snow," she said. Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Probably." Marion shot him a warning look. "She needs rest, not an interrogation." "I'm fine," the woman said, though she clearly wasn't. She tried to push herself further upright and winced, hand going to her ribs. "You have 3 cracked ribs, frostbite on 6 fingers, and more bruises than I can count," Marion said flatly. "Lie down." The woman ignored her. She looked at Adrian again, and this time there was something harder in her expression. "Why did you help me?" "Good question." Adrian didn't have a good answer. "Seemed like the thing to do," he said finally. She stared at him like he was insane. "You don't even know who I am." "No," he agreed. "I don't." "Then you're an idiot." This time he did smile. "Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out." Her name was Ilara Vance. She didn't tell him that right away. It took another 2 days, 2 days of Marion forcing her to eat, to rest, to let her wounds heal, before she said it out loud. "Ilara," she repeated, when Adrian asked her to say it again. They were sitting in the guest chamber, late afternoon light slanting through the windows. She was propped up against the headboard, a blanket across her lap, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She looked stronger, still pale, still hurt, but alive in a way she hadn't been before. "Ilara Vance," Adrian said, testing the name. "That mean anything to me?" "It shouldn't." She hesitated. "My family, we had land south of here, estate, farms, tenants. My father managed it for years." "Had?" Her expression shuddered. "He died 3 years ago. Heart gave out. And my half-brother Dorian inherited everything." Adrian heard the shift in her voice, the bitterness. "I take it you two didn't get along." Lara's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Dorian hated me from the day I was born. Different mother. She was my father's second wife. Common-born, not noble. Dorian never let me forget it." She looked down at her hands, at the bandages still wrapped around her fingers. "When my father died, Dorian got everything. The estate, the title. I got nothing." "That's how inheritance works," Adrian said, though he didn't like it. "I know." Alara's jaw tightened. "But Dorian didn't just take the estate. He took everything my mother left me. Jewelry, property, money, things that were mine by law. And when I tried to fight him on it..." She trailed off, and Adrian saw the shadow cross her face. "He hurt you," Adrian said quietly. Ilara looked up at him, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then, "He beat me. More than once. And when that didn't shut me up, he locked me in my room for 2 weeks. No food, no water. Just silence." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "And then," Ilara continued, her voice steady now, cold, "he sold me." The words hung in the air like a blade. "Sold you," Adrian repeated, "to a nobleman, Lord Cadmus Thorne, old, cruel, rich enough to pay Dorian a fortune for a wife." She said the word like it was poison. "I was supposed to marry him, be his property, and if I refused..." She gestured vaguely at the bruises still visible on her arms. Dorian made it clear what would happen. Adrian didn't speak, didn't trust himself to. "So I ran," Ilara said. "Middle of the night. I got maybe 10 miles before Dorian's men caught me. They dragged me back, beat me, stripped me, and then..." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "Then Dorian left me out in the snow, said the cold would teach me a lesson." "He left you to die," Adrian said, his voice low, dangerous. Alara met his gaze. Yes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the snow-covered hills beyond the estate walls. He's going to come looking for you, he said finally. I know. And when he does, he's going to want you back. I know. Adrian turned to face her. What do you want? Alara blinked, like the question surprised her. What do I want? Yeah. She stared at him, something unreadable in her expression. I want to be free, she said quietly. I want Dorian to pay for what he did. I want my inheritance back. I want... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter what I want. People like me don't get to want things. That's not true. Isn't it? Alara's smile was bitter. You don't know how the world works, Duke Blackthorn. Men like Dorian, men with titles, money, power, they don't lose. They don't face consequences. They do whatever they want, and people like me just disappear. Adrian crossed the room, stopped in front of her, and crouched so they were eye level. Not here, he said. Alara stared at him. What? Not here. Adrian's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. You're on my land now, and as long as you're here, nobody touches you. Not your brother, not Lord Thorn, nobody. You can't promise that. Watch me. For the first time since she'd woken up, Alara looked genuinely shaken. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Adrian stood, jaw tight. Because someone should have done it a long time ago. The first letter arrived a week later. Adrian was in the training yard running drills with his men when one of the guards approached, holding a sealed envelope. Courier just delivered this, sir. Says it's urgent. Adrian took the letter, broke the seal, and read. It was short, direct. To Duke Adrian Blackthorn, it has come to my attention that you are harboring my sister Alara Vance on your estate. I demand her immediate return. She is a ward under my legal guardianship, and her presence on your land constitutes theft of property. Return her within 3 days, or I will take measures to retrieve her myself. Dorian Vance. Adrian read it twice, then crumpled the letter in his fist. Sir? The guard asked. Get everyone inside the walls, Adrian said. Double the watch. No one gets in or out without my say-so. The guard's eyes widened. Are we expecting trouble? Adrian's smile was cold. Yeah, we are. Alara was in the library when he found her. She'd been spending more time out of bed, moving around the estate, slowly regaining her strength. Marion had cleared her for light activity, though she still tired easily. Now she sat in a chair by the window, a book open in her lap, afternoon sunlight casting her face in gold. She looked up when Adrian entered, and her expression shifted. What's wrong? He handed her the letter. Alara read it, her face going pale. He found me. Yeah. How? Doesn't matter. Adrian leaned against the desk, arms crossed. He's not getting you back. Alara set the letter down, hands trembling slightly. You can't fight him, Adrian. Dorian has money, soldiers, connections. If you refuse him, I don't care. You should. Her voice rose, sharp with fear. He'll destroy you, your estate, everyone here. That's what he does. Adrian met her gaze steady. Let him try. Alara stood, the book tumbling from her lap, and crossed the room until she was standing right in front of him. You don't understand. Dorian doesn't lose. He doesn't stop. If you protect me, he'll make you his enemy, and I'm already his enemy, Adrian said quietly. The moment I pulled you out of that snow, I chose a side, and I don't run from fights. Alara stared at him, something breaking in her expression. You're insane, she whispered. Probably. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. She shook her head, eyes bright with something that might have been tears. Why are you doing this? Adrian didn't answer right away. He looked at her, this woman who'd been beaten, betrayed, left to die, and saw something he recognized, something he'd buried a long time ago, someone who refused to stay down. Because you deserve better, he said finally. Alara's breath hitched. For a moment she just stood there, staring at him like she didn't know what to say. Then the doors to the library slammed open. Marion stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her face pale. Adrian, she said, We have a problem. There were men at the gates. Adrian took the stairs 3 at a time, Alara and Marion right behind him. By the time they reached the courtyard, half his guards were already assembled, weapons drawn, eyes on the walls. How many? Adrian barked. 20, one of the guards called down from the tower. Maybe more, armed, waiting outside. Adrian climbed the wall, looked out over the gates. A small force stood in the snow, men in matching black cloaks, swords at their hips, horses stamping restlessly. At the front, a man sat astride a white stallion, his posture arrogant, his expression cold. Dorian Vance. He looked like Alara. Same dark hair, same sharp features, but where her eyes held fire, his held nothing but contempt. Adrian Blackthorn! Dorian's voice carried easily across the snow. I know you're in there, and I know you have my sister. Adrian didn't respond. I've come to take her back, Dorian continued. Peacefully, if possible. But I will take her back. Open the gates, hand her over, and we'll forget this ever happened. Beside Adrian, Alara stood frozen, her face pale, her hands clenched into fists. Stay here, Adrian told her. Adrian, stay. Here. He descended the wall, walked to the gates, and signaled for them to be opened, just wide enough for him to step through. The gates creaked open, and Adrian walked out into the snow, alone, unarmed except for the sword at his hip. Dorian's smile widened. Duke Blackthorn, a pleasure. Wish I could say the same. Dorian's smile didn't falter. I'll make this simple. You have something that belongs to me. Return her, and we can both move on with our lives. She's not property, Adrian said flatly. She's my ward, under my guardianship, which means, legally, she is my property. Dorian leaned forward in his saddle. Now, I understand you may have feelings about this. Misguided chivalry, perhaps. But the law is very clear. Alara belongs with me. No, Adrian said. Dorian's smile vanished. Excuse me? She's not leaving, and if you try to take her, you're going to have a problem. Dorian's expression darkened. Are you threatening me, Duke Blackthorn? I'm telling you how this is going to go. Adrian's voice was calm, cold. You're going to turn around, ride back to wherever you came from, and you're going to leave Alara alone, permanently. For a moment, Dorian just stared at him. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you? Dorian gestured to the men behind him. I could take her right now, storm your gates, burn your estate to the ground, and there's nothing you could do to stop me. Adrian didn't blink. Try it. The two men stared at each other, the air between them thick with tension. Then Dorian's smile returned, colder this time, sharper. You're making a mistake, Blackthorn, a very expensive one. I'll take my chances. Dorian pulled his horse around, his men falling into formation behind him. You have 3 days, he called over his shoulder. 3 days to come to your senses. After that, he looked back, his eyes cold. After that, I stop asking nicely. And then he was gone, the men disappearing into the snow. Adrian stood there for a long moment, watching them go. Then he turned and walked back through the gates. Alara was waiting for him in the courtyard, her face pale, her eyes wide. What did you do? She whispered. Adrian met her gaze. What I had to. And for the first time since he'd found her in the snow, he saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear. It was hope. The 3 days that followed felt like waiting for a storm that never broke. Adrian doubled the guard rotations, had weapons sharpened, supplies inventoried. He walked the walls every morning and every night, scanning the horizon for movement. His men didn't ask questions. They knew better, but he could feel their unease. It hung in the air like smoke. Alara spent most of her time in the library or her room, recovering but restless. Marion checked on her twice a day, changing bandages, monitoring the frostbite. The damage to her fingers was healing, but slowly. 2 of them would probably never regain full feeling. Could have been worse, Marion said one afternoon, rewrapping Alara's hand with clean linen. Could have lost them entirely. Alara didn't respond. She just stared out the window, her jaw tight. Marion finished the bandage, tied it off, and sat back. You planning to talk about it? About what? Whatever's eating you alive. Alara's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. This time Alara did smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. I've had a lot of practice. Marion studied her for a moment, then stood, gathering her supplies. He's not going to let Dorian take you. You know that, right? I know. Alara's voice was quiet. That's what scares me. Marion paused at the door. Adrian survived worse than your brother. Has he survived someone like Dorian? Alara looked up, and there was something raw in her expression. Someone who doesn't fight fair? Who doesn't stop? Marion didn't answer. She just left, the door clicking shut behind her. Alara sat there alone, staring at her bandaged hands, and felt the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. She'd brought this here. This danger. This threat. Adrian had saved her life, and now she was going to get him killed. The thought made her sick. On the second night, Adrian found her in the training yard. It was late, past midnight, and the courtyard was empty except for the guards on the walls. Alara stood near the weapon racks, dressed in a borrowed tunic and trousers, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She held a practice sword in her hands, testing the weight, her movements slow, deliberate. Adrian watched her from the shadows for a moment before stepping forward. You're going to hurt yourself, he said. Alara spun, startled, the sword dropping to her side. I didn't hear you. That's the point. Adrian crossed the yard, stopped a few feet away. What are you doing out here? Couldn't sleep. So you thought you'd swing a sword around in the dark? Alara's chin lifted. I thought I'd learn how to defend myself. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You know how to use that? No. She gripped the hilt tighter. But I'm going to. For a moment, Adrian just looked at her. This woman who'd been beaten, starved, left to die, and was now standing in his training yard at midnight, holding a weapon she didn't know how to use, refusing to give up. All right, he said finally. Show me what you've got. Alara blinked. What? Your stance. Show me. She hesitated, then shifted her weight, lifting the sword awkwardly in front of her. Adrian winced. That's not great. I told you I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, but I didn't think you'd be that bad. He stepped closer, adjusting her grip on the hilt. Loosen up. You're holding it like you're trying to strangle it. Alara's hands relaxed slightly. Feet wider, Adrian continued, tapping the inside of her boot with his own. You're off balance. Someone comes at you like that, you're going down. She adjusted her stance, and Adrian circled around her, studying her form. Better, he said. Now swing. Alara swung the sword in a wide, clumsy arc. It was slow, uncoordinated, and would have gotten her killed in about 3 seconds. Adrian caught the blade with his bare hand, stopping it mid-swing. Again, faster this time, and don't telegraph it. Don't what? You're pulling back before you swing. Anyone with eyes can see it coming. He released the blade, stepped back. Again. Alara swung again, then again, and again. Adrian corrected her grip, her footwork, her angle. She was a fast learner, focused, determined, but she was also exhausted. After 20 minutes, she was breathing hard, sweat dampening her hairline. Enough, Adrian said. I'm fine. You're about to collapse. I said I'm fine. Adrian stepped in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. You've been awake for 2 days straight. You're still recovering from hypothermia, and you're pushing yourself too hard. I need to be ready, Alara said, her voice tight. When Dorian comes back, you're not going to be the one fighting him. Her eyes flashed. I'm not going to hide while you... Yes, Adrian said flatly. You are. Alara's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Adrian thought she might actually swing the sword at him. Instead, she threw it down, the blade clattering against the stone. You don't get to make that decision for me, she said. I just did. Why? The word came out sharp, frustrated. Why do you care so much? You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me. Adrian held her gaze. I know enough. What does that mean? He didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same thing he'd seen that first day in the snow. Someone who'd been knocked down so many times she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up. But she was standing now. Bruised, battered, barely holding on, but standing. It means, Adrian said quietly, that I'm not letting anyone hurt you again. Alara stared at him. something raw and unsteady flickering across her face. "You can't promise that." "Watch me." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Alara turned away, her shoulders tight, her breathing uneven. "You're going to regret this," she said softly. "Protecting me. Fighting Dorian. All of it." "Probably," Adrian agreed. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "Then why do it?" Adrian picked up the practice sword she'd dropped, turned it over in his hands. "Because someone has to." The next morning, a rider arrived. Not Dorian, someone else. Adrian was in the stables when the guard found him, and by the time he reached the gates, the rider was already inside. A thin, wiry man in his 50s, dressed in travel-worn clothes, his face haggard. "Who are you?" Adrian asked. The man dismounted, stiff and sore, and pulled a sealed letter from his coat. "Name's Gareth. I was steward to the Vance estate, before Dorian took over." Adrian took the letter, broke the seal, and read. It was a list. Names, dates, transactions, evidence of theft, fraud, embezzlement. Dorian had been siphoning money from the estate for years, selling off properties that weren't his, forging documents to cover his tracks. And at the bottom of the list, a single line. Marriage contract between Alara Vance and Lord Cadmus Thorne. Payment received. 10,000 gold marks. Adrian looked up at Gareth. "Where did you get this?" "I kept copies. Hid them before Dorian could burn everything." Gareth's voice was rough, tired. "I've been running for 3 weeks. Dorian's men are hunting me. But I had to get this to someone who'd listen." "Why me?" Gareth met his gaze. "Because you're the only one who didn't turn her away." Adrian folded the letter carefully, slipped it into his coat. "Does Dorian know you have this?" "He suspects, but he doesn't know I made it this far." "He will soon." Adrian turned to one of the guards. "Get this man food, water, a bed, and keep him out of sight." Gareth nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you." Adrian didn't respond. He was already walking back toward the main hall, his mind racing. This changed everything. Booked. He found Alara in the library again, curled up in the same chair by the window, a book open in her lap. She looked up when he entered, and her expression shifted. "What's wrong?" Adrian crossed the room, handed her the letter. Alara read it, her face going pale. "Where did you get this?" "A man named Gareth. Says he worked for your father." "Gareth?" Alara's breath caught. "He was my father's steward. I thought Dorian had him killed." "He's alive, and he brought proof." Adrian sat down across from her. "Everything you told me, Dorian stealing your inheritance, selling you to Thorne, it's all here. Documented. Legal." Alara stared at the letter, her hands trembling. "This could destroy him." "Yeah. If this got to the authorities, if someone with power saw it, Dorian would lose everything," Adrian finished. Alara looked up at him, and for the first time there was something other than fear in her eyes. Something fierce. "We could take him down." Adrian nodded slowly. "We could. But we'd need to get this to someone who can actually do something with it. A magistrate. A lord with enough influence to stand up to Dorian, and that's going to take time." Alara's expression hardened. "We don't have time. Dorian's deadline is tomorrow." "I know. So what do we do?" Adrian leaned back, thinking. "We give him what he wants." Alara's eyes widened. "What?" "We let him think he's won. We arrange a meeting, and when he shows up..." Adrian's smile was cold, sharp. "We bury him." The meeting was set for noon the next day, in neutral territory. A clearing 2 miles south of the estate, far enough from the walls that Dorian wouldn't feel threatened, close enough that Adrian's men could respond if things went wrong. Adrian rode out with 6 guards, all armed, all silent. Alara wanted to come, but he'd refused. Marion had agreed with him, and between the two of them, they'd convinced her to stay behind. "You're not ready," Adrian had told her that morning, "and if something goes wrong, I need to know you're safe." Alara had glared at him, furious, but she'd stayed. Now Adrian sat astride Reaver in the middle of the clearing, snow falling lightly around him, and waited. Dorian arrived exactly on time. He rode at the head of a column of 20 men, all armed, all watching Adrian with cold, predatory eyes. Dorian himself looked smug, confident, like he'd already won. He dismounted, walked forward until he was 10 paces from Adrian, and stopped. "Duke Blackthorn," he said, his voice smooth, "I'm glad you came to your senses." Adrian didn't respond. Dorian's smile widened. "Where is she?" "Safe." "That wasn't the agreement." "The agreement," Adrian said coldly, "was that we'd meet. We're meeting." Dorian's expression darkened. "I want my sister, now. She's not your sister. She's your victim." "She's my ward," Dorian snapped, "and you have no legal right to keep her from me." Adrian reached into his coat, pulled out the letter, and tossed it at Dorian's feet. Dorian stared at it, then bent slowly, picked it up, and read. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get this?" he said quietly. "Does it matter?" Dorian crumpled the letter in his fist, his jaw tight. "This proves nothing. It proves you're a thief, a fraud, and that you sold your sister like livestock. She's worthless," Dorian spat. "A bastard with no claim, no title, no—" "She has more claim than you," Adrian interrupted. "And when this gets to the right people, you're finished." For a long moment, Dorian just stared at him, his expression twisting into something ugly, dangerous. Then he smiled. "You really think you can threaten me?" Dorian said softly. "You think some piece of paper is going to save you?" "I think it's going to bury you." Dorian laughed, sharp, humorless. "You're even stupider than I thought." He turned to his men. "Kill him." Adrian's hand went to his sword, but before anyone could move, a voice rang out across the clearing. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Everyone turned. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, tall, gray-haired, dressed in the formal robes of a magistrate. Behind him, a dozen armed guards in royal livery. Adrian recognized him immediately. Magistrate Aldrich Greaves, one of the most powerful legal authorities in the kingdom. Dorian's face went white. Greaves stepped forward, his expression cold. "Dorian Vance, you are under investigation for fraud, theft, and trafficking. You will surrender yourself and your men immediately." "This is absurd," Dorian said, his voice shaking. "I've done nothing wrong. We have testimony, documentation, and witnesses." Greaves gestured to the guards. "Take him." Dorian's men hesitated, looking at each other, uncertain. "Do not move," Dorian hissed at them. Then to Greaves, "You can't do this. I have rights. You have nothing," Greaves said flatly. "Your assets are frozen. Your title is under review, and you are coming with me." For a moment, Dorian looked like he might fight. His hand went to the sword at his hip, his eyes wild. Then Adrian spoke. "Don't," he said quietly. Dorian's gaze snapped to him, and Adrian saw the hatred there, raw, burning, murderous. "This isn't over," Dorian said. "Yeah," Adrian replied. "It is." The Greaves' guards moved forward, surrounding Dorian and his men, disarming them efficiently. Dorian didn't resist. He just stood there, staring at Adrian, his face twisted with rage. As they led him away, he turned back one last time. "You think you've won?" he called out. "You think this is the end?" Adrian didn't answer. Dorian laughed, bitter and sharp. "She'll never be safe. Never. There are others, Thorn, his allies. They'll come for her. And when they do, Adrian said, his voice carrying across the clearing, "they'll deal with me." Dorian's smile faltered. Then he was gone, dragged away by the guards, his men following in silence. Greaves approached Adrian, his expression neutral. "You took a risk, Duke Blackthorn. Harboring a fugitive. Defying a legal guardian." "She wasn't a fugitive," Adrian said. "She was a survivor." Greaves studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "The investigation will take time. Weeks, perhaps months. But if the evidence holds—" He paused. "Dorian Vance will never hold power again." "What about Alara?" "She'll be called to testify, but her inheritance, her freedom, those will be restored." Greaves glanced back toward the road where Dorian had disappeared. "Assuming she survives that long—" Adrian's jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means Dorian made enemies, powerful ones, and they won't be happy about this." Greaves met his gaze. "Keep her close, Duke Blackthorn, and keep your walls high." Then he turned and left, his guards following. Adrian stood there in the clearing, alone except for his men, and felt the weight of what he'd just done settle over him like a cloak. He'd won. But Greaves was right. This wasn't over. When Adrian returned to the estate, Alara was waiting in the courtyard. She stood near the gates, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. The moment she saw him, she ran forward. "What happened?" she demanded. "Where's Dorian?" "Gone," Adrian said, dismounting. "Arrested. He's being taken to the capital for trial." Alara stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Arrested?" "Yeah." "How?" "Gareth's testimony, the documents, and a very well-timed magistrate." Adrian handed Reaver's reins to one of the guards. "It's over, Alara. Dorian's finished." For a moment, Alara didn't move. Then she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Adrian stepped forward, uncertain. "Alara, I thought he'd kill you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought he'd—" "He didn't." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time since he'd found her in the snow, she smiled. It was small, fragile, barely there, but it was real. "Thank you," she said softly. Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The celebration that night was quiet. No feast, no music, no grand speeches, just the core staff, Marion, Gareth, a handful of trusted guards, gathered in the main hall, sharing a meal and a sense of cautious relief. Alara sat beside Adrian, quieter than usual, picking at her food. She'd changed into a clean dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked lighter, like some invisible weight had been lifted. "You all right?" Adrian asked quietly. She nodded. "Just processing. It's a lot." "Yeah." She set down her fork, turned to face him. "What happens now?" "Now?" Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Now we wait. The magistrate investigates. Dorian goes to trial, and you get your life back." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Alara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," Adrian admitted, "but it's a start." She was quiet for a moment, then, "What about Thorn?" Adrian's expression darkened. "What about him? He paid for me. 10,000 gold marks. He's not going to just let that go. He doesn't have a choice." "Doesn't he?" Alara's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Men like Thorn don't lose, Adrian. They don't forgive, and they don't forget. Then we'll deal with him too." Alara shook her head. "You can't fight everyone. Watch me." She stared at him, something unreadable in her expression. Then she reached out, placed her hand over his. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything." Adrian looked down at her hand, small and pale against his, and felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, something dangerous. "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "Oh." The attack came 3 days later. Adrian was in the training yard when the alarm bell rang, a sharp, urgent clang that cut through the afternoon air like a knife. He was on his feet instantly, sword drawn, already moving toward the gates. "What is it?" he shouted. One of the guards leaned over the wall, his face pale. "Riders, coming fast, maybe 30 of them." "Dorian's men?" "No, sir, different colors, red and black." Adrian's blood went cold, red and black. Thorn's colors. "Close the gates!" he barked. "Get everyone inside, now!" The guards scrambled into action, pulling the heavy iron gates shut, barring them from the inside. Adrian took the stairs 2 at a time, reaching the top of the wall just as the riders came into view. 30 men, maybe more, all armed, all moving fast. At the front, a man in polished armor sat astride a massive warhorse, his face hidden behind a steel helm. The riders stopped 50 paces from the gates, and the man in armor dismounted. He removed his helm. Lord Cadmus Thorn. He was older than Adrian had expected, late 50s, maybe 60, but he moved with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. His face was sharp, cruel, his eyes cold. "Adrian Blackthorn!" Thorn's voice was deep, commanding. "I've come for what's mine." Adrian stepped to the edge of the wall, his hand on his sword. "You've got no claim here, Thorn. Turn around and leave." Thorn smiled. I paid good money for that woman. She belongs to me. She's not property. She is to me. Thorn gestured to his men. Now, you can open those gates and hand her over, or we can take her by force. Your choice. Adrian's jaw tightened. You're not getting her. Then you're a fool. Thorn raised his hand and his men drew their weapons. I'll give you one more chance. Open the gates, or I'll burn this place to the ground. Adrian looked down at the men, at Thorn, at the odds stacked against him. Then he smiled. Come and try, he said. Thorn's expression darkened. So be it. He raised his hand, and everything went to hell. Thorn's men charged. They hit the gates like a battering ram, shields raised, swords drawn. Arrows flew from the walls, striking armor, finding gaps. Men screamed, horses reared. Adrian fought from the wall, directing his guards, firing arrows, holding the line. But there were too many. The gates shuddered, cracked, and then a scream from inside the courtyard. Adrian's head snapped around. Alara. He took the stairs 3 at a time, heart pounding, sword still in his hand. The courtyard was chaos, guards running, servants scattering, and in the middle of it all, Alara. She was on her knees, hands bound, a knife to her throat. The man holding her was young, wiry, dressed in Thorn's colors. Drop the sword, the man shouted, or I kill her. Adrian froze. Alara's eyes met his, wide with fear. Don't, she whispered. The man pressed the knife closer. I said drop it. Adrian's grip tightened on the hilt. Then slowly, he let the sword fall. It hit the ground with a dull clang. The man smiled. Smart choice. And then Alara moved. She drove her elbow back into the man's ribs, hard and fast. He grunted, his grip loosening, and she twisted, wrenched the knife from his hand, and drove it into his thigh. He screamed. Alara rolled away, gasping, and Adrian was already moving. He hit the man like a freight train, driving him into the ground, fists slamming into his face, his ribs, his gut. The man tried to fight back, but Adrian didn't stop, didn't slow. By the time someone pulled him off, the man wasn't moving. Adrian stood, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles, and turned to Alara. She was still on the ground, shaking, the knife clutched in her hand. You all right? He asked. She nodded, but her hands were trembling. Adrian pulled her to her feet, held her steady. How did they get in? I don't know, she said. I was in my room, and then the gates exploded inward. Thorn's men poured through the opening, swords raised, shouting, charging. Adrian's guards met them head on, and the courtyard became a battlefield. Adrian grabbed his sword, pushed Alara toward Marion. Get her inside, lock the doors, don't open them for anyone. Marion nodded, already pulling Alara away. Then Adrian turned back to the fight and let the storm take him. The battle lasted 20 minutes. It felt like hours. Adrian fought like a man possessed, his sword cutting through armor, flesh, bone. He'd been trained for this, years of war, years of survival, and it showed. But Thorn's men were good, disciplined, ruthless. They pushed forward step by step, driving Adrian's guards back toward the main hall. Adrian killed 3 men, wounded 5 more, but there were too many. He felt a blade slice across his ribs, felt the sharp burning pain, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. And then, a horn, loud, clear, cutting through the chaos. Everyone froze. Adrian looked up, riders, dozens of them, pouring through the broken gates, wearing the colors of the royal guard, and at their head, Magistrate Greaves. Stand down! Greaves's voice boomed across the courtyard. By order of the crown, stand down! Thorn's men hesitated, looking at each other, uncertain. Thorn himself stood near the gates, his face twisted with rage. You have no authority here. I have every authority, Greaves said coldly, and you, Lord Thorn, are under arrest. For what? Human trafficking, bribery, conspiracy. Shall I go on? Thorn's face went white. Greaves gestured to his men. Take him. The royal guards moved forward, surrounding Thorn, disarming his men. Thorn didn't fight. He just stood there, staring at Adrian with pure, undiluted hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. Adrian, bleeding, exhausted, met his gaze. Yeah, he said. It is. And watched as they dragged Thorn away. and watched as they dragged Thorn away. The silence that followed felt heavier than the battle. Adrian stood in the middle of the courtyard, surrounded by bodies, broken weapons, and blood-soaked snow. His ribs screamed with every breath, and he could feel warm blood soaking through his shirt where the blade had caught him. Around him, his guards were doing the same, standing, breathing, trying to process what had just happened. Greaves dismounted, walked over to Adrian, and stopped. "You look like hell," the magistrate said. "Feel worse." Adrian pressed a hand to his ribs, winced. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your life, apparently." Greaves glanced around the courtyard, his expression grim. "We got word Thorn was mobilizing. Took us 3 days to get here. Almost wasn't fast enough." "Almost?" Greaves studied him for a moment. "You need a physician." "I need a drink." "That too." Greaves gestured to his men. "Clear the courtyard. Get the wounded to the infirmary, and someone find Duke Blackthorn a damn medic before he bleeds out." Adrian waved him off. "I'm fine." "You're not, but you're too stubborn to admit it." Greaves turned toward the main hall. "Where's the woman?" "Inside. Safe." "Good. Keep her that way." Greaves paused. "Thorn's arrest won't hold forever. He's got friends, money, influence, and when he gets out, he won't," Adrian said flatly. Greaves raised an eyebrow. "You sound sure of that." "I am." The magistrate studied him, then shook his head. "Just be careful, Blackthorn. You've made enemies today, powerful ones." "Wouldn't be the first time." Greaves almost smiled. "No, I suppose it wouldn't." Marion found Adrian before he made it inside. She took one look at him, blood-soaked, pale, swaying slightly on his feet, and her expression went from concerned to furious in about half a second. "Sit down," she ordered. "I'm fine." "Sit. Down." Adrian sat. Marion peeled back his shirt, examined the wound, and swore under her breath. "It's deep. You're lucky it didn't hit anything vital." "Doesn't feel lucky." "Shut up." She pulled out a needle and thread from her satchel, poured alcohol over the wound. Adrian hissed through his teeth and started stitching. "You're an idiot. You know that?" "So I've been told." "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." Marion pulled the thread tight, harder than necessary, and Adrian grunted. "Stop talking." He did. By the time she finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Marion tied off the stitches, bandaged the wound, and stepped back. "You need rest," she said. "I need to check on Alara." "She's fine. I locked her in her room like you asked." "She all right?" Marion hesitated. "Physically? Yes. Mentally?" She shook her head. "She's scared, Adrian, and angry, and she's not going to stay locked up much longer." Adrian stood, testing his balance. The world tilted slightly, but he stayed upright. "Where is she?" "Guest wing. But if you're going up there, at least put on a clean shirt. You look like you fought a war." "I did," Marion sighed. "Just be gentle with her. She's been through enough today." Alara's room was dark when Adrian knocked. "Go away, Marion," came the muffled reply. "It's not Marion." Silence. Then footsteps, fast and light, and the door swung open. Alara stood there, still in the same dress from earlier, her hair loose and wild, her eyes red-rimmed. The moment she saw him, her expression crumpled. "You're alive," she breathed. "Yeah." She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped forward and hit him, hard, in the chest. Adrian grunted, stumbled back a step. "What was that for?" "For being an idiot," her voice cracked. "You could have died out there. You could have—" "I didn't." "But you could have!" She hit him again, softer this time, and Adrian caught her wrist. "Alara, I told you to be careful," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you Thorn was dangerous, and you just went out there, and I did what I had to do. You almost got yourself killed." "So did you," Adrian said quietly. Alara froze. "That man in the courtyard," Adrian continued, "the one with the knife. You fought back." "I didn't have a choice." "You did. You could have waited for me, for the guards. But you didn't." He released her wrist, stepped closer. "You fought, and you won." Alara looked down, her hands trembling. Was terrified. "I know. I thought he was going to kill me. He didn't, because I got lucky. No, Adrian said, because you're stronger than you think. Alara's breath hitched, and she looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't feel strong. You are. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Alara stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and wrapped her arms around him. Adrian stiffened. He wasn't used to this, wasn't good at it. But then he felt her shoulders shaking, felt her tears soaking into his shirt, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her as tightly as he dared. It's over, he said quietly. Thorn's gone, Dorian's gone, you're safe. For how long? Her voice was muffled against his chest. As long as it takes. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. You can't protect me forever, Adrian. Watch me. Alara's laugh was soft, bitter. You keep saying that, because I mean it. She searched his face, and something in her expression shifted. Why? Adrian didn't answer right away. He looked at her, this woman who'd been beaten, sold, left to die, and was still standing, and felt something in his chest tighten. Because you deserve it, he said finally. Alara's eyes filled with fresh tears. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You survived. The estate settled into an uneasy calm over the next week. Greaves and his men stayed for 3 days, helping to repair the gates, clear the bodies, and take statements. Thorne's surviving men were arrested, sent to the capital in chains. Thorne himself was locked in a cell, awaiting trial. Dorian, too, remained imprisoned. But Adrian didn't trust it. Didn't trust the system, the magistrates, the lords who held power. He'd seen too many guilty men walk free because they had the right name or the right amount of gold, so he kept the guard rotations doubled, kept the gates reinforced, kept his sword close. Alara noticed. You're waiting for something, she said one evening. They were in the library, sitting by the fire. She'd taken to spending her evenings there, reading, recovering, slowly reclaiming pieces of herself. Adrian looked up from the report he'd been reading. What makes you say that? You haven't relaxed since the battle. You're always watching, waiting. Old habit. It's more than that. She set down her book, turned to face him. You think they're coming back? Adrian didn't deny it. I think men like Thorne and Dorian don't go quietly. They're in prison. For now. Alara's expression tightened. You think they'll escape? I think they'll try. She was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. What do we do if they do? We fight. And if we lose? Adrian met her gaze. We won't. Alara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're very confident for a man who almost died last week. I'm still standing, aren't I? Barely. He couldn't argue with that. The message came 2 weeks later. A courier arrived at dawn, half frozen, barely conscious. The guards brought him inside, and Marion got him warm and coherent enough to deliver his message. Adrian read the letter in his study, his jaw tightening with every word. Duke Blackthorne, Lord Cadmus Thorne has escaped custody. Last seen heading north. Authorities are in pursuit. Advise extreme caution. Magistrate Aldrich Greaves. Adrian read it twice, then crumpled it in his fist. Damn it! He was on his feet, already moving, already planning. He found Alara in the training yard. She'd been spending more time there, working with the guards, learning to defend herself properly this time. She saw his expression and stopped mid-swing. What's wrong? Thorne escaped. The practice sword slipped from her hands, clattered to the ground. What? He's out. Heading north. Alara's face went white. North, toward here. Maybe. We don't know yet. Adrian stepped closer, kept his voice calm. But we're going to be ready. He's coming for me, Alara said, her voice hollow. He spent 10,000 gold marks. He's not going to let me go. He doesn't have a choice. Doesn't he? Her voice rose, sharp with fear. Adrian, he escaped from a royal prison. He has resources, men. If he wants me back, he's not getting you back. You can't know that. Yes, Adrian said, his voice hard. I can. Alara stared at him, breathing hard, and for a moment Adrian thought she might break. But then her expression hardened, her jaw set, and she bent to pick up the practice sword. Teach me, she said. What? Teach me to fight, really fight, not just drills, not just practice. She gripped the sword tighter. If Thorn comes, I'm not hiding. I'm not waiting to be saved. I'm fighting. Adrian studied her. You sure? Yes. He nodded slowly. All right. But we do this my way. No shortcuts. No ego. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Fine. And if I tell you to run, you run. Alara's eyes flashed. I'm not running anymore. If I tell you to run, Adrian repeated, you run. Understood? For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then she nodded. Understood. Good. Adrian drew his own blade, a real one this time, not a practice sword. Let's get started. Us. They trained for 6 hours straight. Adrian didn't go easy on her. He couldn't afford to. He taught her footwork, balance, how to read an opponent's body language, how to strike fast and hard, how to defend when she was outmatched. Alara was a fast learner, but she was also reckless. She threw herself into every drill with a kind of desperate intensity, like she was trying to make up for years of helplessness in a single afternoon. Adrian had to pull her back more than once. You're going to get yourself killed, he said, after she charged him for the third time, leaving herself wide open. I'm trying to learn. You're trying to prove something. There's a difference. He lowered his blade, stepped closer. Slow down. Think. Fighting isn't about rage, it's about control. Alara's hands were shaking. I don't have control. Then find it. She looked up at him, and Adrian saw the fear there, the anger, the desperation. I don't know how. Yes, you do. He reached out, steadied her grip on the sword. You've been fighting your whole life, Alara. You just didn't have a weapon. Something in her expression cracked. I'm tired of being afraid. Then stop being afraid. It's not that simple. It is, Adrian said. You choose every day, every moment, fear or courage, victim or survivor. He stepped back, raised his blade. Now choose. Alara stared at him for a long moment. Then she raised her sword and came at him again. This time, she didn't charge. She moved carefully, deliberately, watching his movements, waiting for an opening. Adrian tested her, pushed her, forced her to adapt. And slowly, piece by piece, she started to get it. By the time the sun set, she was exhausted, sweat-soaked, barely able to lift the sword. But she was smiling. Better? Adrian asked. Better, she agreed. Thorn came 3 days later. Not with an army this time, not with soldiers or banners or siege weapons. He came alone. The guard spotted him at dusk, a single rider on a black horse, moving slowly toward the gates. No weapons visible, no threat, just a man on a horse. Adrian was on the wall in minutes, staring down at the figure below. Thorn looked different, thinner, harder. His clothes were travel-worn, his face gaunt, but his eyes, cold, calculating, cruel, were the same. Adrian Blackthorn, Thorn called up. I've come to talk. We've got nothing to talk about. I think we do. Thorn dismounted, moved closer to the gates. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make a deal. No deal. Hear me out, Thorn said, his voice calm, reasonable. I know I can't take her by force. Not anymore. You've made that clear, so I'm offering you an alternative. Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm listening. Let me see her. One conversation. That's all I ask. If she agrees to come with me willingly, I'll leave peacefully. If she refuses, Thorn spread his hands. I walk away. Forever. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to be smart. Thorn's smile was cold. I'm offering you a way out, Blackthorn. No bloodshed, no war, just a conversation. What do you have to lose? Adrian didn't answer. Behind him, he heard footsteps. He turned. Alara stood a few paces back, her face pale, her hands clenched into fists. I'll do it, she said. No, Adrian said immediately. I'll do it, she repeated, stepping forward. One conversation. That's all he wants. It's a trap. Probably. She looked up at him, and there was something fierce in her eyes. But I'm done hiding, Adrian. I'm done letting him control my life. If he wants to talk, we'll talk. And then I'll tell him to go to hell. Adrian stared at her. Alara, I can do this. I know you can, but you don't have to. Yes, she said quietly. I do. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. Then he turned back to Thorn. She talks to you here, on the wall, in front of witnesses. You stay on the ground. She stays up here, and if you so much as breathe wrong, I put an arrow through your skull." Thorn smiled. "Fair enough?" Adrian gestured to the guards. "Get her a bow." Alara stepped up to the wall, looked down at Thorn, and for the first time in her life, she didn't flinch. "Say what you came to say," she called down. Thorn looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "You look well." "No thanks to you." "I suppose that's fair." Thorn clasped his hands behind his back. "I came to apologize." Alara laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "Apologize?" "Yes." Thorn's voice was calm, measured. "I underestimated you, Alara. I treated you like property, and that was wrong. I see that now." "Do you?" "I do." He stepped closer to the gates. "And I want to make it right. Come with me, willingly, as my wife. And I'll give you everything, wealth, status, protection. I don't want your protection. You need it." Thorn's smile faded. "Dorian's trial is in 2 weeks. When he testifies, he's going to name you as a co-conspirator. Fraud, theft, embezzlement. You'll be arrested, Alara, tried, convicted." Alara's face went white. "Unless," Thorn continued, "you have someone powerful enough to protect you. Someone with influence, resources, connections." He spread his hands. "Someone like me." "You're lying," Adrian said. "Am I?" Thorn looked up at him. "Ask your magistrate friend. Ask him what Dorian's lawyers are planning. Ask him how long Alara has before the royal guard comes for her." Adrian's hands curled into fists. Alara's voice was quiet, shaking. "You're saying if I don't go with you, I'll be arrested." "I'm saying you have a choice," Thorn said. "Come with me, and I'll make sure the charges disappear. Refuse, and—" He shrugged. "Well, the law is the law." Alara stared down at him, her breathing uneven. Then she turned to Adrian. "Is he telling the truth?" she asked. Adrian wanted to say no, wanted to tell her it was all a lie, a manipulation, a trap. But he didn't know. And that uncertainty was enough. "I don't know," he said quietly. Alara's expression crumpled. "So I'm trapped either way." "No," Adrian said. "We'll fight it. We'll find a way." "There is no way." Her voice broke. "Don't you see? He's won. Dorian's won. They always win. Alara, maybe I should just go with him." She looked down at Thorn, her eyes hollow. "Maybe it's easier." "It's not easier," Adrian said, his voice hard. "It's surrender." "What's the difference?" Adrian grabbed her shoulders, turned her to face him. "The difference is you. The woman who fought back in the courtyard. The woman who learned to hold a sword. The woman who survived when everyone else gave up on her." He searched her face. "That woman doesn't surrender. Not to Thorn, not to anyone." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so tired, Adrian. I know. I don't know how much more I can take. You don't have to take it alone." Adrian's voice softened. "Whatever happens, we face it together, you and me. Understand?" Alara stared at him, something breaking in her expression. Then she turned back to Thorn. "No," she said. Thorn's smile vanished. "What?" "I said no." Alara's voice was stronger now, steadier. "I'm not going with you. I'm not marrying you, and I'm not letting you control my life anymore." "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Alara said, "but it's my mistake to make." Thorn's expression darkened. "You'll regret this." "I doubt it." For a long moment, Thorn just stared up at her. Then he smiled, cold, cruel, dangerous. "So be it," he said quietly. And then he whistled. The forest exploded. Men poured out from the trees, dozens of them, armed, moving fast. They'd been waiting, hiding, and now they charged the gates, weapons raised, voices roaring. Adrian's guards scrambled, shouting orders, drawing weapons, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Adrian grabbed Alara, pulled her back from the wall. "Get inside, now! Adrian, go!" She ran. Adrian drew his sword, turned to face the oncoming horde, and felt the cold, familiar weight of inevitability settle over him. This was it, the real fight, and he wasn't sure they could win. The battle was brutal. Thorne's men hit the gates like a wave, slamming into the iron with shields and axes. The wood cracked, splintered, held, but barely. Adrian fought from the wall, firing arrows, coordinating the defense. His ribs screamed with every movement. The wound Marion had stitched, pulling tight, but he ignored it. "Hold the line!" he shouted. "Don't let them through!" The gates shuddered, cracked, and then they broke. Thorne's men poured into the courtyard, and everything turned to chaos. Adrian took the stairs 3 at a time, hit the ground running, sword already swinging. He cut down the first man who came at him, blocked the second, drove his blade through the third. Around him, his guards fought desperately, outnumbered but determined. It wasn't enough. Thorne's men pushed forward, step by step, driving them back toward the main hall. Adrian killed 2 more, wounded 3, but there were too many. He felt a blade catch his shoulder, felt the sharp burning pain, but he kept moving, kept fighting. And then he saw her. Alara. She stood at the entrance to the main hall, a sword in her hands, her face pale but determined. "Get back inside!" Adrian shouted. She didn't move. A man charged her, big, armored, fast. Alara raised her sword, blocked his strike, and drove her blade into his gut. The man went down. Alara stood there, breathing hard, staring at the body. Then she looked up at Adrian and smiled. Adrian's heart stopped. And then Thorne was there. He came out of nowhere, moving fast, a blade in his hand. He grabbed Alara from behind, yanked her back, and pressed the knife to her throat. "Enough!" Thorne's voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down, or I kill her!" The fighting stopped. Everyone froze. Adrian stood in the middle of the courtyard, blood-soaked, breathing hard, staring at Thorne. "Let her go," he said quietly. "Drop your weapons," Thorne countered. "All of you, or she dies." Adrian's jaw tightened. Alara's eyes met his, and he saw the fear there, the desperation. But he also saw something else. Trust. Adrian looked at Thorne. "You're not going to kill her. Try me. You paid 10,000 gold marks for her. You're not going to throw that away." Thorne's smile widened. "You're right, I'm not." He pulled Alara closer. "Which is why you're going to let me walk out of here with her. Now!" Adrian didn't move. "Adrian?" Alara whispered. "Don't!" "I'm not letting you go," he said. "You don't have a choice." "Yes," Adrian said, his voice hard. "I do." And then he threw his sword. It flew across the courtyard, spinning end over end, and buried itself in Thorne's shoulder. Thorne screamed, his grip loosening, and Alara twisted free. She grabbed the knife from his hand, drove it into his thigh, and ran. Thorne collapsed, clutching his leg, blood pouring between his fingers. Adrian was already moving, crossing the courtyard in 3 strides, grabbing Alara, pulling her behind him. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, breathless. "I'm fine." Adrian turned back to Thorne, who was still on the ground, gasping, his face twisted with pain and rage. "It's over," Adrian said. Thorne looked up at him and laughed, sharp, bitter, broken. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" "Yeah," Adrian said. "I do." "You're a fool, Blackthorn." Thorne's smile was vicious. "You can't protect her forever. Someone will come. Someone always does. And when they do," Adrian crouched down, looked Thorne in the eyes. "Let them come," he said quietly. And then he stood, turned to his guards, and gave the order. "Arrest him. Arrest him." The guards moved forward, weapons still drawn, surrounding Thorne where he lay bleeding in the snow. He didn't fight. Couldn't. The blade in his shoulder had gone deep, and the knife wound in his thigh was pumping blood at an alarming rate. Marion appeared from somewhere, her face grim, carrying her medical satchel. She knelt beside Thorne, examined the wounds with clinical detachment. "He'll live," she said. "Unfortunately." "Patch him up," Adrian said. "I want him conscious for what comes next." Thorne's laugh was wet, pained. "You think this changes anything?" Adrian looked down at him. "Yeah, I do." Marion worked quickly, packing the wounds, wrapping them tight enough to stop the bleeding, but not tight enough to be comfortable. Thorne hissed through his teeth but didn't speak. When she was done, the guards hauled him to his feet, roughly, and dragged him toward the cells beneath the main hall. Thorne's men, those who'd survived, were already being rounded up, disarmed, bound. Adrian watched them go, feeling the adrenaline start to fade, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. His shoulder burned where the blade had caught him, and his ribs felt like they were being crushed in a vice. He turned to check on Alara. She stood a few paces away, still holding the knife, her hand shaking. Blood, Thorn's blood, stained the blade and her fingers. "Alara," Adrian said quietly. She looked up at him and her expression was blank. Shock, probably. Adrian crossed to her, gently took the knife from her hands, and set it aside. "You all right?" She stared at him, then down at her hands. "I stabbed him." "Yeah, you did. Twice." "Yeah." She looked back up at Adrian, and suddenly her eyes were bright with tears. "I could have killed him. But you didn't." "I wanted to." Her voice broke. "When he grabbed me, when he put that knife to my throat, I wanted him dead." Adrian pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and felt her body shake with silent sobs. "It's over," he said quietly. "He can't hurt you anymore." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She pulled back, looked up at him. "How?" "Because I'm going to make sure of it." The next morning, Adrian sent a rider to the capital. Not to Greaves this time, to someone higher, someone with real power. The reply came back 3 days later, delivered by a royal courier wearing the crown's colors. Adrian read the letter in his study, alone, and allowed himself a grim smile. When he walked into the cells beneath the main hall, Thorn was awake, sitting on the stone floor with his back against the wall. The wounds had been cleaned and rebandaged, but he still looked like hell. Pale, sweating, diminished. Good. Adrian stopped in front of the bars, arms crossed. Thorn looked up at him, his expression venomous. "Come to gloat?" "Come to give you a choice." "A choice?" Thorn's laugh was bitter. "I'm a prisoner. What choice do I have?" Adrian pulled the letter from his coat, held it up so Thorn could see the royal seal. "The Crown's been very interested in your activities. Bribery, human trafficking, attempted murder, conspiracy. And that's just what we can prove." Thorn's face went pale. "You're going to trial," Adrian continued, "and you're going to lose. The evidence is overwhelming. Witnesses, documents, testimony from your own men." He leaned against the bars. "When they're done with you, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell. If you're lucky. Then why are you here?" Adrian folded the letter, slipped it back into his coat. "Because I'm offering you a way out." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "What kind of way out?" "You sign over all legal claim to Alara Vance. You withdraw any marriage contract, any agreement, any document that ties her to you. You dissolve any business dealings you have with Dorian Vance, and you provide testimony, full, detailed testimony, about everyone involved in this mess. And in exchange? In exchange, the Crown agrees to a reduced sentence, 20 years instead of life. A decent cell, access to books, visitors." Adrian's smile was cold. "You'll still rot in prison, Thorn, but at least you'll be comfortable." Thorn stared at him for a long moment. "And if I refuse?" "Then you hang." The silence stretched. Thorn looked down at his hands, at the bandages, at the bars of his cell. Then he looked back up at Adrian. "Where do I sign?" "Seb." It took 2 weeks to process everything. Magistrate Greaves arrived personally to oversee the proceedings, bringing with him a small army of clerks, lawyers, and witnesses. Thorn signed the documents, slowly, bitterly, but he signed. He gave his testimony, naming names, exposing networks of corruption that reached further than Adrian had imagined. Dorian's name came up again and again. When Greaves finally left, he took Thorn with him, along with a stack of signed confessions thick enough to fill a wagon. "This is going to shake the kingdom," Greaves said as he prepared to leave. "Half the nobility is going to be implicated." "Good," Adrian said. Greaves studied him. "You made enemies today, Blackthorn. Powerful ones." "I'm aware." "And you're all right with that?" Adrian looked back toward the main hall, where Alara was waiting. "Yeah, I am." Greaves shook his head, almost smiling. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." The magistrate mounted his horse, gathered his men. "For what it's worth," he said, "what you did here, protecting her, fighting for her, it matters. People will remember." "I didn't do it for people to remember." "I know." Greaves tipped his head. That's why it matters. And then he was gone. The estate felt different after that. Quieter, calmer, like a storm had passed and left clear skies in its wake. Adrian walked the walls that evening, watching the sun set over the snow-covered hills. His shoulder was healing, his ribs still ached, but he was alive. They were alive. Footsteps behind him. He turned. Alara stood a few paces away, wrapped in a heavy cloak, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. She looked stronger than she had when he'd first found her, healthier, steadier. "You're going to freeze out here," Adrian said. "So are you." He smiled. "Fair point." She moved closer, stood beside him at the wall, looking out at the same view. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "It's cold." "That too." She glanced at him. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got stabbed and beaten." "Because you did." "Yeah." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Alara spoke again. "I got a letter today, from the Crown Solicitor." Adrian looked at her. "And?" "My inheritance has been restored, all of it. The estate, the properties, the money Dorian stole." Her voice was quiet, careful. "It's mine again." "That's good." "It is." She hesitated. "They're asking me to come to the capital, to testify against Dorian, and to formally reclaim everything." Adrian's chest tightened. "When?" 2 weeks. "You going?" Alara was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to face him. "I don't know." "Why not?" "Because..." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Because I don't know if I want it anymore." Adrian frowned. "Want what?" "The estate, the title, all of it." She shook her head. "That life. It destroyed my father. It turned Dorian into a monster. It almost killed me." Her voice wavered. "I don't know if I want to go back to that." "Then don't." She blinked. "What?" "Don't go back." Adrian stepped closer. "You don't owe them anything, Alara. Not the crown, not the estate, not anyone. You fought for your freedom. Don't throw it away because some lawyers say you should. But it's my inheritance, my birthright." "Your birthright almost got you killed." Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "You want my advice? Sell it, all of it. Take the money, build something new. Something that's yours, not your father's, not Dorian's, yours." Alara stared at him, something shifting in her expression. "What would I build?" Adrian looked out at the estate, at the walls, the courtyard, the land stretching beyond. "Anything you want." She followed his gaze, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alara said very quietly, "What if I wanted to stay here?" Adrian's breath caught. "Here?" he repeated. "Here." She looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. "I know it's your estate, your land, and I know I have no right to ask, but..." She trailed off, searching for words. "This is the first place I've ever felt safe. The first place I've ever felt like I could breathe." Adrian didn't know what to say. "And I know you probably don't want..." "Stay," Adrian said. Alara stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "Stay?" He stepped closer, his voice rough. "If you want to be here, then stay. For as long as you want. Forever, if that's what you need." Her eyes filled with tears. "You mean that?" "Yeah." "Why?" Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something in his chest crack open. "Because this place is better with you in it." Alara's breath hitched, and she closed the distance between them, reaching up to cup his face with both hands. "Adrian, I'm not good at this," he interrupted. "I don't know how to. I'm not..." "I know," she whispered. "Neither am I." And then she kissed him. It was soft, tentative, like she was afraid he might pull away. But Adrian didn't pull away. He wrapped his arms around her, pulled her closer, and kissed her back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Stay," Adrian said again, his forehead resting against hers. "Okay," Alara whispered. "I'll stay." Word spread fast. Within a week, the entire estate knew that Alara Vance, the woman Duke Blackthorne had saved from the snow, the woman he'd fought wars for, was staying permanently. Some of the staff were surprised, others weren't. Marion just smiled and said, "About damn time." Gareth, the old steward, was ecstatic. "Your father would be proud," he told Alara one afternoon. "You survived. You fought back. And you won." "I didn't do it alone," Alara said. "No," Gareth agreed, glancing toward where Adrian was drilling guards in the courtyard. "You didn't." Alara started taking on responsibilities around the estate, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged there. She worked with Marion on organizing the infirmary supplies, helped Gareth with the ledgers, trained with the guards. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. 3 weeks later, the formal summons arrived from the capital. Dorian's trial had been scheduled. Alara was required to testify. She read the letter in the library, her face pale, her hands shaking slightly. Adrian found her there an hour later, still staring at the paper. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up, tried to smile, failed. "I have to go back." "Yeah, I have to see him again." Adrian sat down beside her. "I'll come with you." "You don't have to." "I'm coming with you," he said firmly. "You're not facing him alone." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you can. What if I freeze? What if I can't speak? What if—" Adrian took her hand, squeezed it gently. "Then I'll be right there, and we'll get through it together." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Together. Together. But the journey to the capital took 5 days. They traveled with a small escort, 6 guards, Marion, Gareth. The roads were rough, the weather cold, but they made good time. The capital itself was massive. Stone buildings, cobbled streets, thousands of people packed into a space that felt suffocating after the open expanse of Adrian's estate. Alara stayed close to him, her hand gripping his arm tightly. The trial was held in the Royal Hall of Justice, a towering stone building with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows. The gallery was packed, nobles, merchants, common folk, all craning to see the woman at the center of the scandal. Alara sat in the witness box, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight. Dorian sat across the room, shackled, flanked by guards. He looked thinner than Adrian remembered, older, but his eyes, when they landed on Alara, were still full of hate. The prosecutor stood, addressed the court. "Miss Vance, please state your relationship to the accused." Alara's voice was quiet but steady. "He's my half-brother." "And can you describe in your own words the events leading up to your flight from the Vance estate?" Alara took a breath, and then she told them everything. The beatings, the starvation, the theft of her inheritance, the forced marriage contract, the night Dorian left her in the snow to die. She spoke clearly, calmly, without emotion. Just facts. When she was done, the room was silent. The prosecutor turned to Dorian. "Do you deny these allegations?" Dorian's lawyer stood, started to speak. "No." Everyone turned. Dorian was staring at Alara, his expression unreadable. "I don't deny it." His lawyer looked horrified. "My lord, I advise—" "I don't deny it," Dorian repeated, louder this time. "She's telling the truth." The room erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Lord Vance, you are admitting to the charges." Dorian's smile was bitter. "What's the point in lying? You have witnesses, documents, testimony from a dozen people." He looked at Alara. "She won. I lost. That's all there is to it." The judge studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to the jury. "In light of the defendant's confession, this court finds Dorian Vance guilty on all charges. Sentencing will take place at the end of the week." The gavel fell. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Alara stood on the steps, staring up at the sky. Adrian came up beside her. "How do you feel?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Empty, maybe." "That's normal." She looked at him. "Is it?" "Yeah." Adrian leaned against the stone railing. "You've been fighting for so long. Now that it's over, you don't know what to do with yourself." Alara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do I do now?" Adrian smiled. "Whatever you want." She turned to face him fully. What if what I want is to go home? Then we go home. To the estate? To the estate. Alara's smile was small, fragile, but real. Yeah, let's go home. Boshem. The sentencing came 3 days later. Dorian was stripped of his title, his lands, his wealth. Everything he'd stolen from Alara was returned to her, formally, legally, permanently. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. When the guards led him away, he looked back at Alara one last time. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. She just watched him go. They left the capital the next morning. The journey back felt different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. When the estate gates came into view, Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Home, she said softly. Adrian looked at her, smiled. Yeah, home. They rode through the gates together, side by side, and the guards cheered. Marian was waiting in the courtyard, arms crossed, a rare smile on her face. About time you two got back? Alara dismounted, walked over to her, and hugged her tightly. Thank you for everything. Marian patted her back awkwardly. Yeah, don't get sappy on me. Gareth appeared next, beaming. Miss Vance, or should I say Lady Vance now, your inheritance has been fully restored. All properties, all accounts. You're one of the wealthiest women in the kingdom. Alara blinked. What? You're rich, Adrian said helpfully. I gathered that. She looked at Gareth. What do I do with it? Gareth smiled. Whatever you want. What? That night, Alara and Adrian sat in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth. I've been thinking, Alara said. Adrian looked up from the report he'd been reading. About? About what to do with the money, the estate. All of it. And? She set down her book, turned to face him. I want to turn my father's old estate into a refuge. Adrian raised an eyebrow. A refuge? For women like me. Women who are running, who have nowhere to go, who need protection. Her voice was steady, determined. I want to give them what you gave me. A safe place, a chance to rebuild. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. That's a good idea. You think so? Yeah, I do. Alara's expression softened. Will you help me? Of course. She reached out, took his hand. Thank you. Adrian squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to thank me. Yes, she said quietly. I do. Over the next few months, they worked together to make it happen. The old Vance estate was renovated, repaired, transformed. What had once been a symbol of cruelty and control became a sanctuary. Women started arriving. Some were sent by magistrates. Some came on their own, desperate and afraid. Others were brought by people who'd heard whispers of a place where no one would hurt them. Alara met each one personally, listened to their stories, gave them rooms, food, safety, and slowly the estate came back to life. Not as a place of power, as a place of hope. One evening, Adrian found Alara standing in the courtyard of the old estate, watching the sun set. You all right? He asked. She smiled. Yeah, I am. He moved to stand beside her. You've done something good here. We've done something good. Adrian looked at her and felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Yeah, we have. Alara turned to him, her expression serious. I couldn't have done this without you. Sure you could. No, she said firmly. I couldn't. You saved my life, Adrian, more than once. And you gave me a reason to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he just pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and held on. I love you, Alara whispered against his chest. Adrian's breath caught. I know I shouldn't say it, she continued. I know it's complicated, and we haven't talked about... I love you too, Adrian said quietly. Alara pulled back, stared up at him. You do? Yeah. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then what are we waiting for? Adrian smiled back. Good question. And he kissed her. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing. So what now? Alara asked. Adrian looked around at the estate, at the women who'd found safety there. at the life they were building together. Now, he said, we keep going. Alara nodded. Together. Together. Let them come. The words hung in the frozen air like a battle cry. Adrian stood in the center of the courtyard, blood soaking through his shirt. Thorn crumpled at his feet with a blade buried in his shoulder and another in his thigh. Around them the snow was trampled and stained red, littered with weapons and the wounded from both sides. Thorn's remaining men stood frozen, uncertain, looking between their fallen lord and the duke who'd just thrown a sword across 20 feet of open ground without hesitation. "Drop your weapons," Adrian said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "or join him on the ground." One by one, blades clattered into the snow. Adrian turned to his guards. "Secure them, every single one, and get Thorn to the cells before he bleeds out. I want him alive." Marcus, the captain of the guard, moved forward with 4 men. They hauled Thorn up roughly, and he screamed as the movement tore at his wounds. "Careful with him," Marion's voice cut through the chaos. She appeared from the main hall, medical satchel in hand, her face set in grim determination. "I need him conscious if we're going to get answers." Thorn's eyes found Adrian's, burning with hatred even through the pain. "You think this changes anything? You think you've won?" "Yeah," Adrian said flatly. "I do." "You're a fool." Thorn's laugh was wet, pained. "There are others, more powerful than me. They won't let this stand. Then they can come talk to me about it." The guards dragged Thorn toward the cells, his blood leaving a trail in the snow. His men followed, bound and disarmed, their heads down. Adrian stood there until they were all out of sight, then turned to find Alara. She was still near the main hall entrance, the knife hanging loose in her hand, her face pale as bone. She was staring at the blood on the blade, on her fingers, like she didn't quite understand how it got there. He crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Alara." She looked up at him, and her eyes were hollow. "I stabbed him, twice. You defended yourself. I could have killed him. But you didn't." Adrian gently took the knife from her trembling fingers, set it aside. "You survived. That's what matters." Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Adrian, I wanted him dead. When he grabbed me, when he put that knife to my throat, I know." He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her shaking body. "But you're not a killer, Alara. You're a survivor. There's a difference." She buried her face against his chest, her hands clutching his shirt. "I don't feel like a survivor. I feel sick." "That means you're human." He pressed his cheek against the top of her head. "Come on, let's get you inside." Marion intercepted them at the door. She took one look at Alara's blood-stained hands and Adrian's reopened wounds, and her expression went from concern to furious in half a second. "Both of you, infirmary, now!" "Marion, That wasn't a request, Adrian." The infirmary was a long stone room off the main hall, lined with cots and shelves stocked with bandages, herbs, and medical supplies. Marion pointed at a bench, and Adrian sat without argument. He knew better than to fight her when she had that look on her face. She peeled back his shirt, exposing the wound on his shoulder. The stitches from the last battle had torn open, and fresh blood mixed with old. "You're an idiot," Marion said, threading a needle. "So I've been told. You reopened everything, and this new cut is deep enough I can see muscle." She poured alcohol over the wound without warning. Adrian hissed through his teeth. "Little warning next time. Shut up and hold still." She started stitching, her hands quick and practiced. "You keep fighting like this, you're going to get yourself killed." "Didn't have much choice." "There's always a choice." She pulled the thread tight, harder than necessary, and Adrian grunted. "You could have waited for backup, called for the guards, used your brain instead of your sword." Thorn had a knife to her throat. Marion paused, just for a second. Then she kept stitching. "Fine. You get a pass this time, but next time, try not to get stabbed." "I'll make a note of it." Alara sat on the next bench over, watching in silence. She'd washed the blood from her hands, but her fingers still trembled slightly. Marion finished with Adrian, tied off the stitches, and moved to Alara. She examined her hands carefully, checking for cuts or deeper injuries. "Just bruising," Marion said. "You're lucky." "I don't feel lucky." "You will." Marion wrapped clean bandages around Alara's hands, her movements gentle. What you did out there, fighting back when he grabbed you, that took courage. Alara's laugh was hollow. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Marion tied off the bandage, met Alara's eyes. You did good. I stabbed a man who was trying to hurt you, to take you away, to control you. Marion's voice was firm. Don't you dare feel guilty for defending yourself. Alara's eyes filled with tears. It doesn't change how it feels. No, Marion agreed. It doesn't. First time you hurt someone, it stays with you. But you'll survive it, just like you've survived everything else. She stood, gathering her supplies. Now get some rest, both of you, before I sedate you myself. Adrian didn't rest. He couldn't. As soon as Marion left, he was on his feet, heading for his study. Gareth was already there, surrounded by stacks of documents, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. Tell me we have enough, Adrian said. Gareth looked up, his expression grave. We have evidence of fraud, embezzlement, human trafficking, and conspiracy. Contracts with Thorne's signature. Ledgers detailing payments. Testimony from witnesses who saw the transactions. Is it enough to convict him? It's enough to hang him. And Dorian, too. Gareth set down the papers he'd been reading. But there's a problem. Adrian's jaw tightened. What problem? These documents implicate more than just Thorne and Dorian. There are 5 other names here, lords and merchants who invested in Thorne's operations. They may not have known exactly what he was doing, but they funded it. So we go after them too. It's not that simple. Gareth removed his spectacles, rubbed his eyes. These are powerful men, Adrian. Connected men. If we accuse them without ironclad proof, they'll close ranks. They'll bury us in legal proceedings and political maneuvering. Then we get ironclad proof. How? Adrian thought for a moment, staring at the map of the kingdom spread across his desk. We make them think they still have a chance. We invite them here. Tell them we want to discuss Thorne's business dealings. Make them think we're open to negotiation. Gareth's eyebrows rose. You want to trick them into incriminating themselves? I want to give them a choice. Cooperate and face reduced charges, or fight us and go down with Thorne. That's risky. Everything about this is risky. Adrian looked at Gareth. Can you draft the invitations? The old steward was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll have them ready by morning. Bought. The invitations went out the next day. 5 letters, each carefully worded, each carrying the Blackthorn seal. 3 days later, 5 men arrived at the estate. Adrian met them in the main hall, which he deliberately left sparse and cold. No fire in the hearth, no servants offering wine or refreshments, just a long table with chairs and 20 armed guards lining the walls. The message was clear. This wasn't a social call. The 5 men took their seats slowly, exchanging nervous glances. Adrian recognized most of them from court functions. Lord Garrett, thin and sharp-featured. Lord Ashford, young and arrogant. Corwin the merchant, heavy-set and sweating despite the cold. And 2 others whose names Adrian couldn't remember but whose discomfort was obvious. Adrian remained standing at the head of the table. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Your letter was quite insistent, Lord Garrett said, his voice tight. Though I'm unclear why we're here. You're here because of your business dealings with Lord Cadmus Thorne. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I have no business with Thorne, Garrett said quickly. Too quickly. Adrian placed a leather folder on the table, opened it to reveal a contract. This is your signature, is it not? An investment of 50,000 gold marks in Thorne's import operations. Garrett's face went pale. That's a legitimate business venture. Is it? Adrian pulled out another document. Because according to Thorne's private ledgers, your money was used to purchase 3 women from families in the southern provinces, women who were then sold into forced marriages. Dead silence. Lord Ashford stood abruptly. This is absurd. I invested in textiles and spices, nothing more. Then explain this. Adrian slid a second ledger across the table. Payment records showing funds from your accounts going directly to known traffickers. Ashford sat back down, his arrogance crumbling. Corwin cleared his throat. Duke Blackthorn, I assure you, none of us had knowledge of Thorn's illegal activities. We were simply investors. You were accomplices. Adrian's voice was cold. Whether you knew the details or not, you funded human suffering, and now you're going to answer for it. One of the unnamed lords, a gaunt man with thinning hair, spoke up. What do you want from us? I want the truth. Full disclosure of every transaction, every payment, every correspondence with Thorn. I want testimony that will help dismantle his entire network. And if we cooperate, Lord Garrett asked carefully, then I'll recommend leniency, fines and restitution instead of prison time. Your titles and lands remain intact, though your reputations will be damaged. And if we refuse? Adrian leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table. Then you'll be charged as co-conspirators in human trafficking, and you'll hang alongside Thorn. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lord Ashford reached for a pen. Where do I sign? One by one, the others followed. Even Garrett, though his hands shook as he wrote his name. When the last signature was dry, Adrian collected the documents and handed them to Gareth. Make copies. Send the originals to the Crown immediately. As the 5 men filed out, escorted by guards, Corwin paused at the door. You're making powerful enemies, Duke Blackthorn. I'm aware. They won't forget this. Adrian's smile was cold. Good. Neither will I. Alara found him in the study an hour later, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. You did it, she said softly. He didn't turn around. Did what? You broke them, without drawing a single blade. They broke themselves. I just gave them the opportunity to admit it. She moved closer, stood beside him. 5 men just walked out of here knowing they helped finance the suffering of dozens of women, and all they're getting is a fine. It's not enough, Adrian agreed, but it's something. Their testimony will help convict Thorn and Dorian. It'll expose the whole network. And what happens to the women they hurt? Some of them will get their lives back, some won't. He finally looked at her. But at least they'll know someone fought for them, that their pain wasn't ignored. Alara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want to do more. More? I have my inheritance back. All that money, all those properties. She turned to face him fully. I want to use it to help women like me, women who are running, who have nowhere to go. I want to create a place where they can be safe. Adrian studied her face. A refuge. Yes, that's ambitious. I know. Her voice was steady, determined. But I have the resources. And I have you, if you'll help me. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Of course I'll help you. Her smile was bright enough to chase away the winter cold. Then we start tomorrow. The response from the Crown came faster than expected. A royal courier arrived 5 days later, carrying sealed documents bearing the king's seal. Adrian read them in his study, Alara looking over his shoulder. They're moving forward with the trials, Adrian said. Thorn and Dorian both. 2 weeks from now, in the capital. And the others? Being investigated. Their assets frozen pending the outcome of the main trial. He set down the letter, turned to face her. They want you to testify. Alara's face went pale. Testify in front of everyone? You don't have to if you don't want to. I can ask them to accept a written statement instead. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the letter. Then she shook her head. No, I'll do it. I want to look them in the eye when I tell the world what they did. You're sure? I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm sure. Adrian took her hand, squeezed it gently. Then I'll be right there with you. They traveled to the capital a week later with an escort of 20 guards, Marion and Gareth. The journey took 4 days through snow-covered roads and bitter cold. The capital was enormous, a sprawling city of stone and iron, thousands of people packed into streets that felt claustrophobic after the open expanse of Adrian's estate. The royal courthouse stood at the city's center, a massive structure with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that cast colored light across marble floors. The trial was held in the Grand Hall of Justice, and it seemed like half the kingdom had shown up to witness it. The gallery was packed with nobles, merchants, common folk, all craning to see the two men who'd caused such scandal. Thorn sat in chains on one side of the chamber, flanked by guards. His shoulder and leg were still bandaged, his face gaunt and pale. On the other side sat Dorian, looking even worse, his hands trembling, his eyes hollow and sunken. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Advocate Sterling, stood and addressed the court. Your Honors, the Crown presents overwhelming evidence of human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder spanning nearly a decade. The accused have orchestrated a network of suffering that has destroyed countless lives and corrupted the very institutions meant to protect our citizens. She presented the evidence methodically, contracts bearing Thorn's signature, ledgers, detailing payments for women purchased like livestock, testimony from survivors who'd escaped his network, testimony from the 5 lords who'd cooperated. It was damning. When it was Alara's turn to take the stand, Adrian watched from the gallery as she walked to the witness box. She wore a simple dark dress, her hair pulled back, her shoulders straight. Miss Vance, Sterling began, please tell the court about your relationship with the accused, Dorian Vance. Alara took a breath. He's my half-brother. We share a father, but had different mothers. And can you describe your father's estate and your position within the family? My father was a landowner. When he died 3 years ago, everything went to Dorian, the title, the estate, all the properties. By law, I was entitled to certain assets my mother had left me. Jewelry, a small property, some money. Dorian took it all. Did you attempt to recover these assets legally? I did. Dorian refused to return them. When I pressed the issue, he became violent. Can you elaborate? Alara's voice remained steady, clinical. He beat me, multiple times. When that didn't silence me, he locked me in my room for 2 weeks without adequate food or water. A murmur ran through the gallery. And then what happened? He arranged a marriage contract with Lord Cadmus Thorn. I was to be sold for 10,000 gold marks. When I refused, Dorian had his men strip me and leave me in a snowstorm to die. The murmur became a roar. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! Sterling turned to face the gallery, letting the impact of Alara's words sink in. Then she turned back. How did you survive? Duke Adrian Blackthorn found me. He brought me to his estate and saved my life. And what happened when Lord Thorn discovered your location? Alara recounted the attacks, the siege, the final confrontation in the courtyard. Her voice never wavered, never broke. She told the truth plainly, without embellishment. When she finished, Sterling asked one final question. Miss Vance, in your own words, what do you want from this court? Alara looked directly at Dorian, then at Thorn. I want them to face justice. I want every woman they hurt to know that someone fought for them. And I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The gallery erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but it took several minutes for the crowd to settle. When it was Dorian's turn to speak in his own defense, he stood slowly, his chains rattling. Do you have anything to say? The judge asked. Dorian looked at Alara, and for a moment Adrian thought he might apologize, might show some shred of humanity. Instead, he smiled, cold and bitter. She was always worthless, just like her mother. The courtroom exploded. Guards had to physically restrain several people in the gallery who surged forward. The judge banged his gavel so hard Adrian thought it might break. Dorian Vance, the judge said, his voice like iron, you are found guilty on all charges. You are hereby stripped of your title, your lands, and all assets. You are sentenced to 30 years of hard labor in the northern mines. Dorian's smile vanished. The judge turned to Thorn. Lord Cadmus Thorn, the evidence against you is even more extensive. You orchestrated a criminal enterprise that spanned years and destroyed dozens of lives. This court finds you guilty on all charges. Thorn's face remained expressionless. You are sentenced to death by hanging, sentenced to be carried out 1 month from today. The guards led both men away. Dorian stumbled, nearly fell, had to be dragged out. Thorn walked under his own power, his head high, but his eyes found Adrian's one last time, and Adrian stared back until Thorn disappeared through the doors. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered in the square. Word of the verdict had spread, and hundreds of people lined the streets. Some were cheering. Others stood in silence, processing what they'd witnessed. Alara stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the sea of faces. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, young, barely 20, with a scar across her cheek and bruises on her arms. "Miss Vance?" Alara turned. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up, for fighting." The woman's voice shook. "I was sold too, to a merchant 3 years ago. I escaped, but I never thought anyone would care enough to do anything about it." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah, I care, and I'm going to make sure this never happens to you or anyone else again." Sarah wiped her eyes, nodded, and stepped back into the crowd. Others came forward then. Women who'd been trafficked, abused, discarded. They thanked Alara. They thanked Adrian. And Adrian realized something profound. This wasn't just about Thorn or Dorian anymore. This was about changing the world, one person at a time. They returned to the estate 2 weeks later. The journey back felt different, lighter, like they were carrying hope instead of fear. When the gates came into view, Alara let out a long, slow breath. "Home." Adrian smiled. "Yeah." They rode through together, side by side, and the entire estate turned out to greet them. Guards lined the walls, servants filled the courtyard. Even Marion was there, arms crossed but smiling slightly. Gareth hurried forward, beaming. "The Crown has officially restored all your properties, Miss Vance. You're one of the wealthiest landowners in the kingdom." Alara dismounted, shaking her head in disbelief. "I still can't quite believe it." "Believe it," Adrian said. "You earned it." That night they sat together in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth. "I've been thinking about the refuge," Alara said. "I want to use my father's old estate, transform it into something good." "That's fitting." "I want to hire staff who understand what these women have been through. Create programs to help them heal, learn skills, rebuild their lives." Her eyes were bright with passion. "Make it a real sanctuary." "You'll do it," Adrian said. "I have no doubt." She looked at him, and her expression softened. "I couldn't do any of this without you." "Yes, you could." "No." She shook her head. "You saved my life, Adrian. More than once. You fought for me when no one else would. You gave me a reason to keep going." Adrian didn't know what to say to that. Alara moved closer, took his hand. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. "I know it's fast," she continued. "I know we've been through hell and back, but I need you to know—" "I love you too," Adrian said. Alara's breath caught. "You do?" "Yeah." Her smile could have lit the entire estate. "Then what are we waiting for?" Adrian stood, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. Not desperately, not urgently, but like they had all the time in the world. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "So what now?" Alara asked. Adrian looked around the library, at the books lining the walls, the fire warming the room, the life they were building together brick by brick. "Now," he said, "we build something that lasts, something good." Alara nodded. "Together. Together." Outside, snow began to fall again. But inside the walls of the Blackthorn estate, surrounded by people who'd fought beside them and believed in them, the future didn't look dark anymore. It looked bright. And for the first time in either of their lives, they both believed it would stay that way. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Adrian stood at the gates of what had once been the Vance estate, the place where Alara had suffered, where Dorian had ruled with cruelty and greed. Now it looked nothing like the cold, oppressive manor he'd heard about in her stories. The walls had been repainted a warm cream color. Gardens that had been neglected were now blooming, even in the late spring chill. Windows that had been barred were now open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. And over the main entrance, a new sign had been mounted in carved wood. Sanctuary House. Alara stood beside him, her hand in his, looking up at the building with tears in her eyes. "It's real," she whispered. "It's actually real." "You did this," Adrian said. "We did this." He couldn't argue with that. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of construction, hiring, planning. They'd converted the old estate into a refuge with 20 private rooms, a communal kitchen, a library, a training yard, and spaces for learning trades, sewing, cooking, bookkeeping, anything that could help the women who came here build new lives. Marion had agreed to serve as the head physician. Gareth managed the finances. Adrian had assigned 4 of his most trusted guards to provide security, with strict orders that no one entered without permission and no one left unless they wanted to. The first residents had arrived 3 weeks ago. 5 women, all survivors of trafficking or abuse, all referred by magistrates or advocates who'd heard about what Alara was building. Now there were 12. "You ready?" Adrian asked. Alara nodded, squeezed his hand, and together they walked through the gates. Inside, the main hall had been transformed into a bright, welcoming space. Long tables were set for dinner, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Women moved through the space, some helping in the kitchen, others setting tables, a few reading quietly in corners. They looked up when Alara entered, and several smiled. A young woman named Catherine approached, wiping flour from her hands on her apron. She'd been one of the first to arrive, sold by her uncle to pay gambling debts. Now she worked in the kitchen and was learning to manage the household accounts. "Miss Vance, we're almost ready for dinner. Will you and the Duke be joining us?" "We will," Alara said warmly. "Thank you, Catherine." The girl beamed and hurried back to the kitchen. Adrian watched the exchange, something tightening in his chest. "She looks different, healthier." "She is. They all are." Alara's voice was soft. "It's amazing what safety and kindness can do." They moved through the hall, greeting residents, checking on progress. In one corner, Marion was teaching a class on basic medicine, how to treat wounds, recognize infections, deliver babies if necessary, skills that could save lives. In another room, a former merchant was teaching mathematics and bookkeeping to a group of 6 women who listened with intense concentration. "Most of them want to work," Alara explained as they walked. "They don't want charity. They want skills, opportunities, independence. So we give it to them." "Exactly." They climbed the stairs to the second floor where Alara's old room had been. She'd had it completely renovated, turned it into an office where she managed the refuge's operations. Inside, papers covered the desk, applications from women seeking refuge, letters from magistrates, requests for funding, proposals for expansion. "We're already at capacity," Alara said, sitting down at the desk. "And we have a waiting list of 20 more. We need more space." "Then we'll build it." She looked up at him. "Adrian, we can't keep expanding forever. The costs are manageable. Between your inheritance and my estate's income, we can afford it." He leaned against the desk. "Besides, this is the best investment I've ever made." Alara's eyes softened. "You really mean that?" "I do." She stood, moved around the desk, and wrapped her arms around him. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour." She laughed, pressed her face against his chest. "I love you. I love you too." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the office that had once been a prison and was now a command center for something good. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Come in," Alara called. Marion entered, carrying a medical bag. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation." Adrian straightened. "What kind of situation?" "A new arrival. Just showed up at the gates. She's been badly beaten, barely conscious. Says her husband found out she was trying to leave." Alara was already moving toward the door. "Where is she?" "Infirmary. I've stabilized her, but she's terrified. Won't let anyone touch her except me." "I'm coming." Alara looked back at Adrian. "Will you—" "I'll talk to the guards. Make sure no one followed her here." She nodded, grateful, and followed Marion out. Adrian went downstairs, found the head of security, a grizzled veteran named Thomas, who'd served with him during the war. "Thomas, we have a new resident. Potentially dangerous situation. I want double watches on all entrances. Anyone approaches the gates claiming to be family, you send them to me first. Understood?" "Understood, sir." "And if anyone tries to force their way in, they'll regret it," Thomas finished. "Good man. Fun." Dinner that night was subdued but warm. The new arrival, a woman named Margaret, sat at the end of the table, her arm in a sling, her face swollen and bruised. But she was eating slowly, and Catherine sat beside her, speaking quietly, reassuring her. Alara watched from her seat beside Adrian, her expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That 6 months ago, that was me. Broken, terrified, convinced I'd never be safe again." She looked at him. "And now I'm sitting here watching other women find the same safety I found. It's surreal. You've built something incredible." "We've built something incredible," she corrected, "and it's just the beginning." After dinner, they walked the grounds together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I got a letter from the Crown today," Alara said. "They want to use Sanctuary House as a model, establish similar refuges in other regions." Adrian raised his eyebrows. "That's ambitious." "I know, but if we can save even a few more women—" She trailed off, looking out at the gardens. "Then we do it," Adrian said. "Whatever it takes." She smiled, leaned against him. "You know people are talking about us. People are always talking." "No, I mean really talking. About the frontier duke who saved a woman from the snow and then declared war on half the nobility to protect her." Her eyes sparkled. "They're calling it a love story." Adrian snorted. It was survival. It was both. She turned to face him fully. "Adrian, what we did, what we're still doing, it matters. Not just to me, not just to the women here. To everyone who sees that things can be different, that power doesn't have to mean cruelty." He cupped her face in his hands. "You changed me, you know. Before you, I was just going through the motions, surviving, existing. You gave me a reason to actually live. And you gave me my life back." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and somewhere in the house behind them they could hear laughter, genuine, unforced laughter from women who were learning to feel safe again. Later that night, as they prepared to ride back to the Blackthorn estate, Alara paused at the gates of Sanctuary House. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not leaving me in the snow. For fighting for me. For believing I was worth saving." Adrian pulled her close. "You saved yourself, Alara. I just gave you a place to land." "Then thank you for that," she smiled up at him, "and for everything that came after." They rode home together through the gathering darkness, side by side as always, the lights of Sanctuary House glowing behind them like a beacon. And ahead, the Blackthorn estate waited, no longer a lonely fortress on the edge of the world, but a home. Their home, where a man who'd learned to survive alone discovered that living with someone was infinitely better. And where a woman who'd been left to die in the snow became the force that changed an entire kingdom. Together, they'd built something that would outlast them both, a legacy not of power or wealth, but of compassion, courage, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a second chance. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but the fire they'd built would burn for generations. And where a woman who'd been left to die in the snow became the force that changed an entire kingdom. Together, they'd built something that would outlast them both, a legacy not of power or wealth, but of compassion, courage, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a second chance. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but the fire they'd built would burn for generations. Dinner that night was subdued but warm. The new arrival, a woman named Margaret, sat at the end of the table, her arm in a sling, her face swollen and bruised. But she was eating, slowly, and Catherine sat beside her, speaking quietly, reassuring her.